Episode 1. The Room Without a Door. I wasn't supposed to listen to her. Not beyond 5 minutes. Not without another doctor in the room. Not without pressing the red button. If she started talking about the mirror. But I did. It was a Tuesday. I remember because it rained exactly 3 drops on the window. I counted them. 3. Then the rain stopped. And she whispered, "Doctor, have you ever found a room that doesn't exist on any map, but always remembers your name?" Her name was Marla Gray, 23. No prior psychiatric record. Found naked, screaming, in front of church with her fingernails torn off and the words, "He's still down there," scratched into her thigh with something that looked like a rosary chain. She hadn't spoken for 4 days. Then suddenly, she wouldn't stop. "The first time I saw it, I was 7, she said. Her eyes didn't blink when she spoke. They flicked around the room like they were trying to memorize the shapes of shadows. It appeared in my grandmother's mirror. Just a frame. Black wood. No door handle. No room number. But the light inside, it was wrong. Like the hallway had forgotten what color is. I leaned forward. "You saw a room inside a mirror?" She smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone when they understand. The kind you give when it's too late for understanding. I didn't just see it. I walked through it. And every time someone disappeared in town, the room grew. The staff said she was delusional. Her psych eval mentioned mirror-induced association and trauma-linked visual hallucinations. But here's the thing. 3 people from her childhood neighborhood had gone missing. Each year. 1 per year. 7 people. 7 years. No suspects. No bodies. And no one had ever noticed a pattern until she drew on the wall of her padded cell in blood. 7 crosses. And beneath them, 1 word. Over and over. Room 313. I made the mistake of staying late that night. I locked the interview tapes in the file room. But when I returned the next morning, there was 1 more tape than I remembered logging. Its label read, "Tape 1, the door that hears." I never wrote that. I played it. Static. Then footsteps. Then a voice, not hers, not mine, just breathing in a low whisper. "If you hear the door knocking, it means it already opened." I went back to her room that afternoon. Marla hadn't moved. She was staring into the stainless steel mirror in the corner, whispering to herself. "He never blinks," she murmured. "The janitor, he's still mopping the floor in room 313, even though he died in 1986. I opened my mouth to ask how she knew that, but then she turned to me, slowly. "Do you believe in rooms that remember things you've never done?" I didn't answer, because in that exact moment, I did remember something. Something that couldn't have happened. When I was 11, a room, no door, just a mirror that flickered when I tried to walk away. Later that night, I asked the maintenance team for the hospital blueprint, just out of curiosity, just to prove to myself that none of this was real. They handed it over. But when I unfolded the map, there it was, a room with no door, no access point, no windows, just a box hidden between Ward B and the east stairwell, labeled, "Our Point 313 Maintenance Storage, decommissioned 1989. I felt cold, because this hospital was built in 1991. That was the last night I slept in peace. I didn't know then that her stories would begin matching real, unsolved cases. I didn't know the tapes would multiply on their own. I didn't know what would happen when I finally found room 313. But I kept listening. Because there's a difference between madness and memory. And deep down, I think room 313 was waiting for me. 2. Episode 2. The Girl with the Salt Eyes. "There was a girl once," Marla said, her voice barely brushing the air. "She cried salt." I didn't move. I'd learned not to interrupt her during these moments. She didn't speak like someone remembering. She spoke like someone reliving, like the memory was stitched under her skin. She lived in the basement wing before it was sealed, before anyone dared call it room 313. I checked the hospital archives later. There had been a wing D beneath the psychiatric floor. Collapsed after a fire in 1998. Cause of fire, unknown. Casualties, 1 female. No identity confirmed. But Marla knew her name. Her name was Clara Vale. Clara had no visitors, no medical records, no last name until Marla gave her one. She was blind, but she would trace people's faces with her fingers, not to see them, to remember them. She said, "We all have different textures," Marla whispered, but I was her favorite. She said I felt like winter. The first time she cried, it burned holes through her bed sheets. The second time, a nurse lost her fingerprints trying to wipe the tears off the tile. The third time, a boy was found collapsed outside her door. His eyes had crusted over with salt. His lungs too dry to scream. I asked Marla why no one stopped her. She laughed, but it wasn't cruel. It was hollow, because she only cried when someone lied to her. And then she said something that made my mouth dry. "You lied to me yesterday, doctor." That's why she's awake now. The tape recorder in my office started playing itself that night. I had left it off. No power, no tape, but still, her voice. Don't lie to her, not even in thought. I heard a low scraping in the background, then a soft sob, then something wet sizzling on metal. I returned to Marla the next day. Her wrists were raw. The mirror in her cell had cracked, spiderweb thin, like it had shattered inward. I asked her directly, "Did Clara exist?" She didn't answer. She only tilted her head to the side like she was listening to something else, something I couldn't hear. Then she said, "Do you know why they locked in the dark?" I didn't, because she was born looking at the truth. Her eyes never saw light. They only saw betrayal. And before I could speak again, she added, "Every salt tear she cried was a name." That night, I received a call from the hospital's oldest nurse. She had been here during the Wing D era. Her voice trembled. "You asked about the girl who cried salt?" I said yes. She paused. "She's real. She was my patient." Then, "But she never died in the fire." My spine tightened. "How do you know that?" Silence. Then, "Because when we tried to bury her, her body cried, and the casket rusted through in one night." I went to the old maintenance records. There it was. Clara Vale, Subject 17B, do not interact. Note, mirror in her room to be sealed permanently. That's when I noticed it. A second signature. Under the mirror restriction. My name, my signature, written in ink that was 20 years old. But I've only worked here for 6 months. That night, I dreamed of her. A girl in a hospital gown, eyes sealed shut with salt. She whispered something in a voice I'll never forget. "You lied when you said you're not afraid of me." Then she opened her eyes, and the world cracked. When I woke up, my office door was soaked. Not with water, with salt, still warm. Episode 3. The janitor who never blinked. It started with the sound of wet footsteps, always at the same time. 3:09 a.m. The nurses said it was a plumbing issue. The tiles expanding. The walls breathing. But Marla said it was him. "He cleans the floor when no one's watching," she whispered, eyes unfocused. "He doesn't blink. And he never forgets a footprint." The first night I stayed late, I heard it too. Soft dragging. A mop? Sliding down the corridor between wards B and C. But when I opened the door, the hallway was dry. Too dry. Like someone had just evaporated the mess. I checked the security footage. 3:09 a.m., nothing. No movement. No figure. But in every frame, the same streak of moisture, appearing on tile after tile, as if something had been erased. I confronted Marla that morning. "Who is he?" She smiled. "He was the last person to try and clean room 313. The archives list him as Samuel Court, facility custodian. Night shift. Time of death, March 7, 2008. Cause, cardiac arrest in sublevel corridor. No foul play suspected, but the reports were contradictory. One nurse said she found him standing. Another said he was curled into a fetal position. Both agreed on one thing. His eyes were open and dry, as if he hadn't blinked in hours. Marla said he was never meant to die here. He saw something in the reflection bucket, she whispered. The water shimmered wrong. It showed him a version of the hospital where everyone had already died. Then she reached toward me slowly, like her fingers were tracing something I couldn't see. He's still trying to mop it away. But the floor remembers the blood. It keeps bleeding back. I laughed. I had to. The absurdity of it. Until I walked past Corridor Delta that evening and saw the footprints. Just two, pointing toward room 313. Made of salt. Still wet. Still warm. I touched one. And for half a second, I saw my own face reflected in the tile, aged hollow, blinking too slowly. The next night, I stayed on purpose. I sat by the nurse's station with nothing but a flashlight, a recorder, and a quiet prayer I didn't believe in. At exactly 3:09 a.m., I heard it again, SWSH, SWSH, SWSH. I stood. The lights above the hallway flickered once, twice. Then came the soft squeak of wet rubber soles. I raised the flashlight, and that's when I saw him. Tall, wearing an old janitor uniform with a name patch that had been torn away. Eyes wide. So wide they looked like they had never been shut. He didn't look up at me. He just kept mopping. His motions were methodical, almost reverent. But what chilled me wasn't his presence. It was what he was mopping. Blood. Fresh. Bright. Still dripping from nowhere. I took a step back. The flashlight flickered. He paused, raised his head, and blinked. Just once. The sound it made wasn't human, like glass shattering underwater. And in the split second before the light went out, I swear, his face was mine. When the backup lights returned, the hallway was empty. No man, no mop, but the smell of bleach lingered like a ghost you couldn't touch. And in the center of the corridor, something written in dripping red. Don't watch him work. He sees you when you blink. I checked the tape recorder. No audio, but on the tape's label, now stained with moisture, were new words, written in the same handwriting I've seen in every confession from Marla. Tape 3, eye contact. The next morning, I asked her why he was cleaning blood that wasn't there. She looked at me like a child might look at a parent who'd forgotten their name. Because that blood belongs to tomorrow. And then she said something that made my breath freeze in my lungs. He only shows himself to people who are already dead inside. That night, I set up a mirror at the end of Corridor Delta, just to see. At 3:09 a.m., he appeared. But this time, he wasn't mopping. He was staring into the mirror, into me. Episode 4, tape recorder from 1982. I found on my desk. A dusty, beige tape recorder, the kind you'd see in courtroom dramas or Cold War interrogation rooms. Heavy, outdated, and definitely not mine. No one had been in my office that night. No cleaning staff. No nurses. I had locked the door, and yet there it sat, perfectly centered, with cassette inside already halfway rewound. Label in faded handwriting. Dr. G. Klein, Session 4C, October 11th, 1982. There's no Dr. Klein on staff. There hasn't been one in this hospital. Ever. I pressed play. The tape clicked, hissed with static, then began. My voice, or something that sounded like me, but slower, heavier, like the version of me that had lived 100 more years than I had. Patient refuses to acknowledge physical surroundings. Claims the walls breathe. Repeatedly mentions room 313 despite that room being sealed in 1979. Then another voice, hers, Marla, but younger, much younger, the tone lighter, the word sharper. It's not sealed. You just stop looking. It's still there, breathing behind paint. I paused the tape. The hair on my arm stood upright. The conversation playing back on this ancient device had never happened. Not in this reality. Not in this timeline. Not in this version of me. And yet, there I was, speaking to a younger version of the woman I had interviewed yesterday. I brought the tape to Marla. Didn't tell her what it was. Just placed it on the floor, between us. She stared at it for a long time. Her lips quivered, not in fear, but in something else. Recognition. You finally found it, she whispered. The beginning of the ending. I asked her who Dr. Klein was. She didn't blink. That was your name before this life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the click of a tape recorder again and again. Every time I blinked, I saw the red light flashing, recording, always recording. And then at 3:13 a.m., my phone rang. Private number. No ID. I answered. Do not rewind the tape. The voice said, you will forget which version of you press play. Then the line went dead. In the morning, I tried to find the original tape recorder. Gone. In its place was a new one. Smaller. Digital. Modern. I clicked play. Nothing. Until the very end. 3 knocks. Then my own voice, trembling. If you're hearing this, don't look in the mirror behind you. I froze, because there was no mirror behind me, until I turned and saw one. Old. Bronze-edged. Not mine. And in the reflection, not me. Someone older. Someone worn down. A version of me who had seen things I hadn't. Yet, I ran to the archives. Search for Dr. G. Klein. One file. A brief staff entry from 1982. Psychiatrist. Terminated. October 12, 1982. Status. Unresolved disappearance. Last seen entering sublevel C. No body. No resignation. No obituary. Just a patient file he left behind. Patient name M. Gray. Date of birth. Unknown. I played the tape one last time that night. Alone. But this time, something new emerged at the very end. Barely audible. A third voice. A child's whisper. You are not real. You're just his memory of guilt. I unplugged the recorder. It kept playing. I smashed it against the wall. The tape popped out. And on the back, written in a new hand. Tape 4. Echoes can't be buried. I asked Marla what it meant. She said nothing. Just hummed a lullaby. One I recognized from somewhere I'd never been. That night, I dreamed of a room with no clocks, where time folded in like wet paper, where I sat across from myself and asked, did you find the body? And I answered, no, I found the voice. Episode 5. The Nurses of the Basement. There are no full moons in the hospital. At least, not officially. The windows in the psychiatric ward are frosted, sealed tight, shatterproof. The light that filters through them is gray and heavy, like it has been soaked in silence. And yet, every 28 nights, when the moon turns white and swollen over the town, something shifts. The patients grow restless. Clocks skip seconds. And somewhere beneath us, women begin to hum. I first heard them when reviewing overnight security footage. There was no video, just audio, 27 seconds long. Low voices. Singing. A lullaby out of sync. Off-key. Like 3 voices singing the same song, but in different time zones. I played it for Marla. She didn't speak. She mouthed the words. Every note. Every pause. Her eyes were closed. When the recording ended, she opened them. They're not ghosts, she said. They're nurses. I pressed her, asked her how she knew. She traced her index finger along the inside of her wrist, slowly, deliberately, because they used to do this, she said, to collect the dreams. She said the nurses weren't assigned. They arrived, always during full moons, dressed in white, faces pale as bone dust, eyes too wide, like they were trying to see something inside you. They didn't ask questions. They didn't speak. They sang. And with small scalpels, they made incisions just below the wrist of the sleeping patients. Clean, precise, surgical. Not deep enough to kill. Just enough to release. They weren't after blood, Marla whispered. They were after memory. The hospital denies everything. They say no nurses are allowed on sublevel B. That all basements below Ward C have been sealed since 2002. No records exist of special staff rotations during lunar cycles. But I found a file, misfiled under maintenance complaints. It described faint singing during night shifts, patients waking up with old scars, and in one note, a scribbled line that gave me chills. One patient says they took her dream of her father's face. She doesn't remember he ever existed now. I asked Marla what happened to those who lost too many dreams. She looked down, quiet for a long time. Then, without blinking, she said, "They become the nurses." I laughed until I checked her chart. Marla Gray. No family history. No records prior to age 11. No school photos. No mention of a mother. But in one early intake note, faded and crossed out, was a single line. Patient claims her mother was a nurse, assigned only during full moons. I stayed late on the next full moon, alone. At exactly 2:11 a.m., the power flickered, only in the psychiatric wing. No alarms, no outages, just humming. It echoed up from the floor, not through the walls. From beneath, I walked to the staircase leading to sublevel B. Locked, chained, but the air, soaked in sterile bleach and rust, carried something else with it. The smell of skin, and faintly a lullaby, being sung backward. I returned to my office. 3 Band-Aids were laid out in a row on my desk. Sterile, unopened, each marked with a different name. M. Gray, S. Court, G. Klein, mine. That night, I dreamt of being held down by soft, gloved hands, of white dresses stained with something that didn't quite look like blood, and women with no faces leaning close, whispering, "Tell us which dreams you like to keep. We'll take the rest." When I woke up, my wrist ached. I looked down. A clean cut, still fresh, still weeping. Inside the gauze was a slip of paper, folded once, written in cursive, elegant and cold. "We've taken the dream of your first lie. You're welcome." I rushed to Marla's room. She was already awake, smiling. "They visited you," she said. I didn't ask how she knew. She reached toward my wrist, touched the bandage, and whispered, "Now you're light enough to enter the next room." On the tape recorder, there was a new file, unlabeled, just a timestamp. 3 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds. And a voice, not mine, saying, "Tape 5, the nurses return when you forget." Episode 6, the patient who ate memories. He didn't have a name, not one the hospital could find, not one he would give. In the files, he was listed only as Patient X17B, nonverbal cooperative. But Marla called him Eater, and she said he had once eaten her birthday. I didn't understand what she meant at first. "He doesn't eat food," she whispered, eyes wide, voice trembling like a piano string just struck. "He eats what people forget." She told me that he didn't talk. He'd walk up to another patient, gently place his hand on their head or shoulder, then pluck a strand of their hair. Not roughly, not violently, tender, intimate, and then he'd place it on his tongue, close his eyes, and hum. When he hums, Marla said, the memory leaves, not just from your mind, but from every room that ever held it. I checked the hospital records. The man had been admitted 8 years ago. No ID, no known relatives. Found wandering the hallways in an abandoned wing, completely naked, holding a bundle of old wigs. When police questioned him, he only said one thing: "I miss how you tasted when you cried." After that, he stopped speaking. I visited his room. Small, bare, clean, too clean, like nothing ever lived in it. But in the corner behind the bed frame, I found a bundle, a small cloth pouch, tied with surgical thread. Inside were dozens of strands of hair, different textures, different colors, some tied with ribbons, others coated in dried saliva, and beneath them all the photo, not a face, just the back of a girl's head, written in fading ink. She forgot how her father smelled. I returned to Marla. Before I could ask, she answered, "He doesn't hurt people. He frees them from what they never wanted to remember." Then she added more quietly, "But sometimes he eats too much, and they forget who they are." One nurse, an older woman who'd been working the overnight shift for nearly 2 decades, pulled me aside a few days later. She looked pale, hands shaking. "There's a woman in Ward C," she said. "Been here a long time. But last night, she sat straight up and asked, 'Who put me here?' That wasn't strange. But then she said, 'We looked her up. There's no record of how she got here. No admission file. No date. Nothing. All that was in her file was one word, written in red ink. Forgotten. I returned to patient X17B. I found him staring at a blank wall. Not just blank, whitewashed, painted over recently. But when I touched it, it felt warm. Too warm. And under the thin layer of paint, I felt something carved in the plaster. I scraped away a small section. 7 names. Scratched deep. Some crossed out. One still visible. My own. That night, I didn't dream. I couldn't. I tried to remember the dream I'd had the night before. It was there. I knew it had made me cry. But it was gone. All I could recall was a humming sound and the taste of something metallic on my tongue. The next morning, I went to Marla's room. She looked at me strangely. "Have we met?" she asked. My stomach dropped. "It's me," I said. "Doctor." She shook her head. "I don't know you." She turned away, humming a low, familiar tune. The exact tune patient X17 be had hummed in the footage I found later that day, when he had been standing outside her room, holding a single strand of long, dark hair. I ran to my office, looked through old photos on my desk. There had been one, me and Marla, proof that we had talked, laughed, something real. But now, the frame was empty, just a blank square of paper, and beside it an envelope. Inside, a hair. Mine. I dropped the envelope. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than memories should feel. There was a note inside, in my handwriting. He asked if you wanted to forget your guilt. You nodded. I didn't remember writing it, but I recognized the ink. It bled through the page like tears. Later that night, the tape recorder turned itself on. A voice, his voice, soft, hollow, ancient. "Tape 6, you asked me to take it. So I did." Episode 7, the book that writes itself. It began with a word, written in ink I didn't own, in a notebook I didn't remember buying. Listen. That was it. Just one word, centered on the first page, in my own handwriting. Except I didn't write it. The notebook appeared on my desk after a session with Marla, a leather-bound journal, worn at the edges, its cover smooth, but not blank. If held at the right angle under fluorescent light, a faint embossed number revealed itself. 313. I flipped through the pages. Empty. Until I blinked. And then the second page held something new. "Dr. Klein, this is impossible. Marla always was..." I stopped breathing. That exact conversation hadn't happened yet, but it would. 12 minutes later, in her room, word for word. When I returned to my office afterward, the third page had filled itself. "Dr. Klein, how long has the book been doing this?" "Marla, before you ever opened it." I dropped the notebook, backed away from it, like it might grow teeth. It didn't. It just waited. I tried not to read it. I told myself it was a trick, stress, delusion. But the next night, curiosity broke through logic like light through a fractured window. Page 4 was waiting. And this time, it wasn't dialogue. It was my thoughts, word for word, written exactly as I just thought them seconds earlier. If this is real, I'm not the one in control. I took the notebook to Marla. Without touching it, she smiled. "You opened it?" I nodded. "Then it's too late." I asked her what it was. "It's not writing your future," she said softly. "It's remembering it." I flipped to the back of the notebook. Nothing. Blank pages stretching endlessly. But as I stared, I noticed the ink bleeding forward from the very last page. Writing itself. One letter. Then 2. A sentence slowly appearing, like something was carving it into existence with a hot needle. I turned to it. It read, "You will read this sentence the first time at 2:37 a.m., alone, while the thing in the mirror behind you blinks." I looked at the clock. 2:37 a.m. I turned around. There was a mirror. I didn't own one. And in its reflection, my face wasn't blinking. But something behind me was. The notebook snapped shut. By itself. The next morning, the words on page 5 had changed. They now read, "He stopped writing because he remembered he didn't need to." I stared at those words for hours. Try and decide who he was. Try and decide if it meant me. Or whoever was holding the pen before me. I brought the notebook to the head administrator of the hospital. She frowned. "We don't allow blank journals on site," she said. "They become too absorbent." Before I could question what she meant, she asked me something that cracked the ground beneath my feet. "How many entries have you written in your chart?" I blinked. "None. I'm a physician." She slid a file across the table. It had my name on it, but the header didn't say staff. It said patient. I ran back to my office, back to the notebook. Page 7 was waiting. A single sentence now written in thick, desperate scrawl. "If you write in the book, the story writes you back." That night, I gave in. I wrote something in the notebook. I don't remember what. I only remember my hand trembling, my fingers moving before my thoughts formed. And when I finished, the sentence below appeared on its own. "Good. You're ready to forget you were ever real." In the morning, my desk was empty. No notebook, no patient files, no voice recorder, no photos, just a single slip of paper taped to the lamp. Tape 7, the writer becomes a written. When I asked Marla about it, she tilted her head and said something I hadn't expected. "I tried to warn you in chapter 1. I didn't understand." She smiled. "You still think this is episode 7. Episode 8. The 8 minutes missing from CCTV. The camera should never go dark. That's what the technician told me. The hallway feed near Marla's room had been stable for 5 years. No glitches, no interference. Not even static. But that night, something cut it. Exactly 8 minutes. From 3 hours, 3 minutes and 13 seconds to 3 hours, 11 minutes and 13 seconds. Perfectly clean. No fading. No blur. Just absence. When the feed resumed, Marla was back in her bed. Soaked. Hair clinging to her skin. Her hands wrapped tightly around something that looked like a handful of wet, black hair. Not her own. I watched the clip 100 times. Rewound. Slowed it down. Nothing. Just a jump. 1 second she's not there. The next, she is. But it wasn't just a return that chilled me. It was her eyes. They were open, and they were wrong. I approached her the next morning. She was humming. Not a lullaby this time. A low, warbled tone, like a memory underwater. I asked her where she had gone. She didn't blink. "You mean during the missing minutes?" I hesitated. "You know about that?" "I left," she said calmly. "I was invited." I asked who invited her. She turned toward the window, which was strange. Her room had no window. "The reflection did," she said. "It told me it had something I'd lost." That night, I reviewed footage from other wings, just in case. At 3:07 a.m., another camera, 2 floors down, caught a brief flicker. A girl, barefoot, soaked, walking backward down the hallway. No face visible, just a mass of dripping hair covering her features. But when she passed under a ceiling light, her reflection flashed across the polished floor. It was Marla, but not. The mouth was too wide. The eyes were open too far. And in her hand, dragging behind her like a leash, was a bundle of scalps. I shut off the monitor, went to the security room, asked for access logs. They laughed. "That camera doesn't even cover that hallway anymore." I pointed at the screen, at the timestamp. They froze. That feed was disconnected last year. Back in my office, I found something tucked under the recorder. A scrap of paper. Pale, soft, almost damp, written in shaky red ink. She brought something back. I returned to Marla. She was already waiting for me. Hair brushed, clothes dry. But her eyes, they were no longer watching me. They were watching through me. "Would you like to see what I brought back?" she whispered. I shook my head. She smiled anyway. "Good. That means it's already inside you." Later that evening, I began to forget words. Simple ones, like elevator, like clock. I'd reach for them, and they'd melt, like ice left too long in the mouth. Then the nosebleeds began, always at 3:03 a.m., always after I saw her in dreams, standing beneath a cracked mirror, whispering, "You weren't supposed to watch." I reviewed the footage one last time, this time frame by frame, and in the very first second after the 8-minute blackout, between the static and the feed resuming, was one clear frame, a face, too close to the lens, eyes hollow, mouth unhinged, skin peeling back from the skull like wet paper, and etched across the forehead in something dark and sticky. "Welcome back, doctor." I blinked, paused the frame, and realized something far worse. The face wasn't hers. It was mine. That night, the tape recorder hissed awake at 3:13. A new label had been scratched into its metal body. Tape 8. She returned with a piece of you. In the recording, my voice spoke a sentence I had never said. "If I forget what happened, does that mean it's forgiven?" Then Marla answered, "No, it means it's ready to happen again." Episode 9, the interview that was never saved. I recorded everything. Every cough, every whisper, every flicker in Marla's eyes. I had 28 sessions filed by date, time, and keyword. There were backups, external drives, cloud redundancy. It was obsessive, but necessary, because if the things Marla said were true, I needed proof. I needed anchors. And yet, somehow, the most important conversation we ever had is the one that no longer exists. It was supposed to be the final interview. She'd been different that morning. Not afraid, not fragile, composed, serene, like someone who had just unpacked a lifetime of secrets and folded them into something she could finally hold. I entered her room. She greeted me with a question. "Do you believe in endings that echo backward?" I hesitated. She smiled. "Good. Then you'll understand why I've saved the last truth for last." The recorder was on. I checked it twice. Red light blinking. Audio levels perfect. I asked her what room 313 truly was. She looked past me. "It's not a room. It's a wound. In the building. In me. In you." I asked her what it wanted. She leaned in, whispered, "It doesn't want anything. It remembers. And remembering is the closest thing to hunger." She spoke for 42 minutes. She told me about the night she was born, on the floor of the sealed-off wing. She said her mother never screamed, only sang, a lullaby in reverse. She said room 313 was never constructed. It grew, from the grief of patients who died unnoticed, from the lies doctors told themselves before they fell asleep. She said the building had a conscience now, and it had chosen me. When she finished, I felt a sharp silence fall over the room. The kind that comes after confession. The kind that waits for something to judge you. I thanked her, stood up, and she said, softly, without looking at me, "Check your recorder before you forget what I looked like." I returned to my office, plugged in the device. Nothing. No audio. No file. Not even a timestamp. The folder marked session_29 was gone. Not corrupted. Not blank. Erased. As if the session had never occurred. As if she had never spoken. I rushed back to her room. It was empty. No trace of her. Bed made. Walls clean. Like no one had ever lived there. I ran to the front desk. "Where's Marla Gray?" The nurse blinked. "Who?" I stared at her, stunned. "The patient in 4B. Been here for weeks. I've been treating her." She typed. Frowned. 4B has been unoccupied since the last remodeling. I opened the patient database. No file. No intake form. No birth certificate. I checked my email. Every message referencing her, gone. The CCTV shows me walking into an empty room and speaking, alone, for 42 minutes. I called the head administrator, asked about Marla Gray. A long pause. Then, "Doctor, are you feeling well?" That night, I sat in my office, pulled out my notebook, the one that writes itself. A new entry had appeared on the last page. "You've lost a patient, but she remembers you." I turned the page. A drawing this time. Pencil. Rough. A face. Hers. With eyes that didn't blink. And below it, tape 9, the interview that couldn't be kept. I looked up. She was standing outside my window, smiling, but we're on the 3rd floor. I blinked. She was gone. The next morning, the hospital reassigned me. They said I'd been working too hard. They said I needed time to recenter. They said there was no such patient. But when I packed up my desk, I found something wedged under the drawer. A strand of black hair. Still wet. Still warm. Episode 10. The Shadow That Talks in Reverse. I didn't press play. The tape recorder turned on by itself. At 3:13 a.m. Again. But this time, there was no voice I recognized. No breathing. No footsteps. Just language. Wrong. Familiar, but mangled, like a hymn dragged backward across a broken tongue. The voice was low, crawling, guttural. It didn't speak in words. It unspoke them. Sentences that sounded like wet fabric being pulled through rusted gears. But I recognized the rhythm, the cadence. It was a Bible verse. Reversed, fragmented, and in the middle of it, 2 words that rang like thunder underwater. Echimortar. Behold, he dies. I tried to stop the recorder. The button jammed. It wanted to keep playing. The sound grew colder, as if each syllable was drawing breath out of the room. I could feel condensation blooming across my skin. My fingertips went numb. My reflection in the monitor started to lag. The voice continued, louder now, but still backward. I ripped the power cord out of the wall. The recorder kept playing. I ran through the halls of the hospital, down the stairwell, out into the parking lot, barefoot, shaking. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to erase the sound in my head. It didn't work. The voice was inside me now, repeating, looping, like it was waiting for me to say it next. In the morning, I brought the recorder to a colleague in the psych audio lab. She listened, pale, silent, then played it in reverse. And that's when we heard it. A verse, clear, sharp, spoken through grit and tears. From the book of Job, he will deliver you from 6 troubles. In 7 no harm shall touch you. But the sentence didn't end there. The voice kept going. A second, hidden line followed it. Not in any scripture. Unless you are the 8th. Then, static. Then, screaming. Mine. That night, I locked the recorder in a lead box. Left it under my bed. At exactly 3:13, I woke up to find it beside my pillow. No tape. No battery. Just a note curled from its mouth like a tongue. The 8th is the one who listens twice. I checked my calendar. I had listened to 8 tapes. Exactly 8. Later that day, I ran into the janitor. Not Samuel Court. The new one. Young. Nervous. But that day, he looked at me and said something he'd never said before. You hear it too, don't you? The voice that plays from the walls. I stared at him. What does it say? He paused, then whispered, it says your name. I returned to the tape one last time, played it in reverse, frame by frame, and at the end, hidden in the noise beneath the static, my voice, whimpering, please make it stop, followed by Marla's whisper, you invited it when you doubted me. The next morning, a Bible appeared on my desk, open to Job 5 verse 19. But all the words on the page have been blacked out, except one, 8, and written in the margin, in looping red ink, tape 10, the one who listens twice dies first. I tried to show it to the administrator. The Bible was gone. She said I hadn't come to work that day, but my security card said otherwise. My signature was logged at 3:13 a.m. There's a shadow in the hallway now. It doesn't move. It doesn't speak. But when I close my eyes, I can hear it, repeating that same backward scripture, over and over, until I forget what direction time moves in. Episode 11, The Blood on the Ceiling. It began with a sound, a slow, deliberate drip. At first, I thought it was the pipes. Then I saw the stain, above my desk, perfectly circular, dark, damp, expanding. I stood beneath it, staring. Then it fell. A drop, thick, heavy, not water, blood. I looked up. No cracks, no open vents, just smooth plaster and a growing, weeping wound. I rushed upstairs to the room directly above my office. It was empty, unused, sealed, but the smell, the metallic sting of it curled through the air like steam off a wound. I unlocked the door. No body, no mess, just a message, written in long, jagged letters across the floor, dragged by fingers that weren't in a hurry. "You're next." I stumbled backward, hands shaking, dialing the security office. They arrived 10 minutes later. The blood was gone. So was the writing. But the stain on my ceiling remained. They shrugged. "Rust," one of them said. But I could see it in their eyes. They had seen it too, and they were afraid. I returned to my office. Everything had been rearranged, not stolen, just moved, subtly, deliberately, like someone had sat in my chair, read my notes, opened my drawers, and then left everything just slightly wrong. There was a single item I didn't recognize, a small, hand-sized mirror lying face down on the desk. I picked it up, turned it over. No reflection, only a single line etched from the inside of the glass. "You've already seen what kills you." I confronted Marla. "Is it me?" I asked, "Am I the one it wants?" She tilted her head. "No," she said. "You were just the first one who didn't pretend it wasn't real." I showed her the stain on the ceiling. She didn't flinch. "The building bleeds when a memory dies," she said. "Something you try to forget finally gave up trying to be remembered." That night, the blood returned. Not a drip this time, a stream. It painted the ceiling above my bed in long, jagged streaks. Patterns. Symbols I didn't recognize, until I saw one that chilled my spine. A perfect spiral. The same one carved into Marla's forearm the night they found her. I filmed it, time-stamped it, uploaded it to a private drive. In the morning, the footage was gone, replaced with an empty loop, a still shot of my ceiling. Pristine, no stain, no movement. But just before the video ended, a flicker. One frame, a figure, upside down, crawling across the ceiling like gravity no longer mattered. Eyes wide, jaw split. Me. The recorder clicked on at 3:13 a.m. This time, it didn't whisper. It groaned, like something birthing itself through metal. A voice. Not mine. Not Marla's. Deeper. Hungrier. The house remembers its sins. Through you. Then silence. Then the sound of something wet dragging itself across tile. I woke up with blood under my fingernails. But no wounds. No pain. Just dread. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that waits. When I walked into the hospital the next morning, no one looked at me. Not out of politeness. Out of fear. One nurse whispered to another as I passed. "That's him. The one with the ceiling." There was a package on my desk, wrapped in white cloth. Inside, a single shoe, soaked, heavy, as if it had been submerged. Underneath, a note. "Walk carefully. The ceiling is watching." I didn't know what it meant until I got home and saw the footprint pressed into the ceiling above my bed. Still wet, still bleeding. The tape recorder hissed once, then spoke. "Tape 11. You shouldn't have looked up. Episode 12. The last tape wasn't hers. The tape was waiting for me. No label, no timestamp. Just a black cassette left on my chair like it had been dropped, or maybe delivered. I didn't remember recording it, didn't remember placing it there. But I knew better than to deny it. Not anymore. I slipped it into the player, clicked record lock to stop it from eating itself, and pressed play. Static, then breathing, then a voice. My voice, but slower, tired, heavier, like it had survived something I hadn't reached yet. If you're hearing this, then you didn't listen. You never do. I froze. The voice laughed. Quiet, hollow, regretful. You think the story was about her, but it never was. It was always about the version of you that stayed behind. The tape began to skip, only it wasn't mechanical. It chose which moments to repeat. It stuttered over the word, remember, like the device itself was trying to claw something back from its own circuits. I remember the dream we never woke from. I remember the room we locked ourselves inside. I remember you. I checked the back of the cassette. There was a number etched in with something sharp. Infinity. The voice on the tape kept talking. Not to me, to someone else. He thinks he's recording this, but he isn't. He's still dreaming. And then, Marla's voice. Small, far away, like she was buried beneath floors of concrete. Don't let him finish. If he says the last sentence, we'll never leave. But the voice did finish. You never woke up. The tape clicked off. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I stood up, walked to the window, looked outside. Everything was wrong. The parking lot had no cars. The trees didn't move. The sky was the color of deep water. No clouds, no stars, no sun. And the mirror on the wall no longer reflected me. It reflected him. He looked like me, but older, frail, eyes like candle wax, mouth stitched into a thin, tight smile. He raised his hand, and on his wrist, a tattoo, 313. I turned back to the tape recorder. It was blinking again, recording. Only this time, the tape inside was clear, transparent, and instead of ribbon, it held something else. Hair, strands of it, coiled tightly like memory wound in circles. I hit eject. Nothing came out. The machine hummed, a soft lullaby, the same one Marla used to hum, but now in my own voice. That's when I realized there was no session 30, no more entries, because I wasn't writing the story anymore. I was a story, a loop, a tape, a voice that someone else would find in a room that doesn't exist, under a ceiling that bleeds. In the drawer beside the recorder, there was one last note, written in black ink, my handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you haven't remembered the dream yet. Underneath it, scribbled fast. Don't wake up. He's still in here with us. I reached for the recorder one final time. The play button was glowing red. I didn't press it. It pressed itself. My voice began to speak, but not in words, in memories. Mine, yours, ours. And it ended with a sentence I'd never heard before. Tape 12. You were never the one listening. You were the one being told. Episode 13. I was never the doctor. I opened my file today. Not Marla's. Mine. I hadn't meant to. I wasn't even sure it existed. But there it was, sitting on my desk. Cream folder. No dust. No name on the front. Inside. Scans. Transcripts. Photos. And a note clipped to the top in red ink. Dr. G. Klein, admittance, 1989. I stared at the date. I was born in 1987. That couldn't be right. Could it? I flipped to the next page. Patient demonstrates strong cognitive patterning, but continues to perform identity simulations of hospital staff. Current delusion. Psychotherapist assigned to room 313. No, this wasn't real. I knew who I was. I knew. I've treated patients. I've written notes. I've recorded tapes. I've interviewed. Marla. I ran to her room. Empty. Again. I ran to security. Demanded footage. They showed me the timestamp hallway feed. 3:13 a.m. Me, walking into her room. Speaking. Gesturing. But no one was there. Just me. Alone. Talking to no one. I stumbled backward. Tried to breathe. The guard frowned. You all right, Doc? I turned to him. His face was blank. His eyes were mine. I locked myself in my office. Opened the final drawer in the desk. The one I never used. Inside, a small mirror, framed in cracked metal, lined with red thread. I looked in. The face that looked back was not mine. It was his. Older. Thinner. Eyes stretched with the weight of things seen too many times. He didn't blink. He just whispered, You were never the doctor. You were the last memory she couldn't let go. And that's when I saw her. Not Marla. The real girl. Younger. Silent. Hair matted. Skin pale. Sitting in a chair across from me. No restraints. No diagnosis. Just her. And she spoke. You were my favorite delusion. I tried to scream. Couldn't. Tried to run. Couldn't. Because the room wasn't real. The building wasn't real. I wasn't real. I was her defense. Her protector. Her lie. The story she told herself to stay sane in the dark. And now, she no longer needed me. The walls around me began to blur. Not fade, bleed. Peeling like pages soaked in memory. My hands flickered. First color. Then texture. Then sound. I was being erased. Like chalk on a board that had been written on too long. The tape recorder clicked. One last message. Tape 13. She's ready to let you go. I looked back at her. She smiled. A peaceful smile. The kind you give to someone you're setting free. I opened my mouth to say goodbye, but there was no sound. Only a feeling. Like waking from a dream that had lived too long inside your bones. The last thing I saw was the ceiling. White. Still. No blood. No spiral. Just light. And then, nothing.